As a parent, you have memories that will stick in your mind more than others. And I remember the first time my son opened his eyes. The first of my boys to open his eyes was my Theo. Now, born so early, their eyelids were still a few shut originally at that point. Because at the last of stages of fetal development, sight is one of the very last senses to develop. It's not until the third trimester where they're able to discern the differences between light and darkness in the womb, and when they're early as well. Now, our boys were 10 days old at that point, and I remember looking into the isolette at the NICU, and he was there laying, one eye open, peeking out at me. Now, for the first time, light had entered that gateway of his iris. In his premature nervous system, it could see light and probably shapes, but likely it couldn't make any sense out of what it was seeing. He was still too undeveloped to see me, even though I'd like to think that he did. But despite the fact that it was not me necessarily he was seeing, or he didn't understand what he was seeing, that's a memory I imagine that I'll carry with me through my whole life. Even though he had no way of understanding, all he knew before him was that soft darkness of the womb. There was that moment when light came in, and his brain began to discern the difference between light and dark. John's gospel opens by describing for us the beginning. He tells us the Word, the Logos of God, who was with God in the beginning before anything else was. Before there was matter to feel, aromas to smell, there was anything to taste or light to see. Nothing was there. That all was made through Him, and not anything was made without Him. And in the Word directing the womb of all creation was life. And that life that came brought light to humankind. Just as all was made through Him, so all is lived through Him. All is seen and experienced through Him. And then we're told this interesting thing by the writer of John, that light shines in the darkness, and yet the darkness did not overcome it. Now, we're being drawn back to that old creation story. The story that the readers would all remember when God stepped in to bring light and bring life. He's also drawing us back to that eternal struggle that's always existed between those two things, darkness and light. He was in the world, and the world came into being through Him. Yet like light and darkness, the world did not know Him. Where before the Word that was God had challenged the light at the original creation, here now, when John begins the gospel story, it's that story of darkness versus light is being retold as creation is reborn, and the Word is again challenging the darkness within creation. A darkness that is in our spiritual blindness, our spiritual infancy, is all that we knew. We were all lost in that darkness like children in the womb. Our eyes fused shut, unable to see what it was that we needed, unable to comprehend the light that was shining. So God, in His wisdom and His mercy, here's what He did. It says that the Word became flesh and lived among us. We have seen His glory. To address our inability to comprehend the light came down to us. The answer to our spiritual infancy, the Word Himself became an infant and lit up our darkness. On Christmas Eve, what normally we're kind of in a borrowed space right now, we would have our Advent wreath somewhere over here. And we'd have our Advent candles, and in the middle of that would be which one? The Christ candle. Because it sits at the center of all that has come before that we remember through this season. Those candles that have been lit one by one, candles of hope, peace, joy, and love, are there to point us to the source of all that light, the one in the middle, the one at the center of our hope, the source of our peace, the bringer of our joy, and the greatest expression of all love. At the center of all of it, of creation and new creation, Jesus is the center. When darkness and light struggled for the first time, He was there, a light at the center. He was at the center of this new creation we remember this night when He was born of Mary, taking our human flesh. And He's at the center of the renewal that continues in our world today, which light symbolizes. Because John told us that the light shone in the darkness, but the light is still shining today. After all these years, after countless attempts of darkness to extinguish it, it still shines because the darkness has not, will not overcome it. And this is a message that I think maybe we need to be reminded of again in the days that we live in. Because we see around us, throughout the world, we have more access to information than ever before of all that is going on around us. And what is it that we see? Streams of hatred, the darkness of confusion, injustice, negativity, and war at every turn. It seems there's an endless parade of disease and humanitarian disaster and bloodshed. And it seems to us in those moments as we are flooded by all of this information that the darkness has indeed overcome the light. It may feel as so many we know, our friends, our family, are struggling with loneliness, depression, grief, heartache, and poverty. It seems that the darkness may have gained the upper hand. It's in those days that we need to hear this message of Christmas that the gospel tells us, that darkness has not overcome the light. We need to be reminded that God did not leave us behind in darkness, but came to us in the flesh, walked among us in our struggle, in our blindness, in our need, and He brought life and light to all of us. All we need to do is open our eyes. At the center of Christmas is a baby in a manger, the beginning of a life that was there at the beginning of all life, and is the new beginning of a world that will never end. The eyes that opened for the first time on that night have now opened our eyes so that we can see the love of God made flesh, born for us. So I wonder, as you sit here this evening, do you feel as if in some way darkness has overcome you or your family and your loved ones? Is the weight of this world too much to bear? The invitation is here, as always, to come into His light and trust in Him. Because the writer also said, all who received Him, who believed in His name, He gave the power to become the children of God. So the invitation is very simple. Will you open your eyes tonight to see the love of God born for you, to save you away from all that darkness and confusion of this world? The question is, will you see? Will you believe? For others, perhaps it's this. Perhaps you have received that light, but you still feel as my son did on that 10 days of life. When he opened his eyes for the first time, you see, but you don't comprehend. Is there a place where you felt overcome by darkness? A struggle that you can't feel like you cannot share? A darkness that tries to overtake you? Perhaps it's a depression, a loneliness, a regret, guilt, or shame. The invitation is the same to you. Open your eyes and see the light of God's love. At the center of Christmas sits a baby who is the very Word made flesh, entering into our darkness to chase it away with glorious, incomprehensible light. Amen.